We'll now start with our inductions of new members.
Will Dr. Leif Anderson please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Leif Anderson, Professor of Functional Genomics at Uppsala University, Professor of Animal Genomics at Texas A&M University, and Visiting Professor at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. Leif Anderson is the world's leading authority on the genomic study of the origin and selected traits of domestic animals. He has repeatedly discovered what happens on the genetic level when animal breeders apply artificial selection to domestic animals and choose particular traits for enhancement. These traits include fat deposition in pigs, the color of wattles and skin in chickens, and coat coloration and gait locomotion in horses. This work is the best modern manifestation of Charles Darwin's pioneering study of variation under domestication. Truly Darwinian in outlook, Leif Anderson has expanded his genomic research program into problems of understanding evolution in nature, including the breeding of Baltic sea herring, the size of rabbits, the peculiar mating system of a colorful shorebird, and size and shape of the beaks of Darwin's finches.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Will Dr. Ann Case please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Ann Case, Alexander Stewart, 1886 Professor of Economics and Public Affairs Emeritus and Director of the Research Program in Development Studies at Princeton University. Lady Angus's best-known early work was on the political economy of competition between states and how this competition affected the election of governors. This work remains heavily cited. Today, she is best known for a wide range of work on health, family structure, and demography. Her paper on the deaths of despair among midlife whites in the U.S. won the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences Casarelli Prize and attracted enormous attention. Her prize-winning work on the origin of the gradient showed that the effect of family income on child health steepens as the child grows older. She discovered that the inferior morbidity and superior mortality of women comes from the composition of disease. Roughly, women get conditions that make them sick, men get conditions that make them dead. Sorry, guys. She is one of the leading scholars of the effects of the AIDS epidemic on child and family outcomes in South Africa.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Will Dr. John Clark please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present John Clark, Professor of the Graduate School at the University of California, Berkeley. John Clark has led in the understanding and the development of the superconducting quantum interference device, known as SQUID, probably the greatest acronym of all time, and exploration of this high-sensitivity device for fundamental studies and applications. He's explored and demonstrated how this device can be used for measurements with a sensitivity up to the quantum mechanical limit. His studies have addressed the sources of 1/f noise, the limits of quantum computing, and the application of SQUIDs for geological exploration and medical imaging. Clark has co-authored the Handbook of Squid Applications for High Sensitivity Electromagnetic Measurements in a Wide Variety of Fields and is universally known for this work.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you. Will Dr. Roger W. Ferguson, Jr. please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Roger W. Ferguson, Jr., President and Chief Executive Officer of TIAA. Roger Ferguson is a world-renowned expert on finance, pensions, and corporate governance. He is the former Vice Chairman of the Board of Governors of the U.S. Federal Reserve System. He represented the Federal Reserve on international policy groups and served on key Federal Reserve System committees, including payment system oversight, Reserve Bank operations, and supervision and regulation. As the only governor of the system in Washington, D.C. on 9/11/2001, he led the Fed's initial response to the terrorist attacks, taking actions that kept the U.S. financial system functioning while reassuring the global financial community that the U.S. economy would not be paralyzed. He is chairman of the Business Higher Education Forum and co-chair of the Committee for Economic Development, and serves on the Congressional Budget Office's panel of economic advisors. He served on President Obama's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness, as well as its predecessor, the Economic Recovery Advisory Board. Dr. Ferguson.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Great to see you here. Will Dr. Edward Mendelsohn please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Edward Mendelsohn, Lionel Trilling Professor in the Humanities at Columbia University. Edward Mendelsohn is one of the leading experts on modern literature of his generation. Central to his research has been his authoritative work as literary executor of the estate of W.H. Auden. He's a leading authority on editing and archiving. Mendelsohn has published essays and reviews on such authors as Thomas Pynchon, Seamus Heaney, T.S. Eliot, Huysmans, Wolfe, Trollope, and Hardy. He was one of the first academics to reflect seriously about the effects of word processing on style and thinking. In recent books, including one in progress, he has turned to moral issues in novels and in the great Western epics. Mendelssohn's work throughout is characterized by distinguished learning, breadth, insight, and disciplinary expertise.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Will Dr. Sabine Schmidtke please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Sabine Schmidtke, Professor for Islamic Intellectual History at the Institute for Advanced Study. Sabine Schmidtke is a dynamic, wide-ranging, and highly productive scholar of early Islam and its theology. Her command of Arabic, Hebrew, and Persian, together with exceptional facility in modern languages, German, French, and English, allows her to open up new perspectives on early Muslim intellectual life and sectarian debates. As the recipient of a generous advanced grant from the European Research Council, she was able to set up a major program in Berlin on what she called the Islamicate world. Her organizational skills have become ever more apparent since her move to the United States, where she has planned conferences and launched new programs, including one on a digital database for Ottoman texts. She works directly from manuscripts, in search of which she has traveled extensively in Europe and the Middle East.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Will Chief Justice Margaret H. Marshall please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Margaret H. Marshall, Senior Counsel at Choate Hall and Stewart LLP and former Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. An anti-apartheid student leader in her native South Africa, Margaret Marshall came to the U.S. as a graduate student and went on to a career at the highest level of the American legal profession. During her tenure on the Supreme Judicial Court, Chief Justice Marshall authored many opinions, including Goodridge versus Department of Public Health, which declared that the Massachusetts Constitution prohibits the state from denying same-sex couples access to civil marriage. The 2003 ruling made Massachusetts the first state to recognize marriage equality. She has used her prominent position to advocate for expanded legal services and access to court for all, regardless of financial need.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof.
Thank you. Congratulations. Will Dr. Stewart H Orkin please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Stewart H Orkin, David G. Nathan Distinguished Professor of Pediatrics at Harvard Medical School and an investigator at Howard Hughes Medical Institute. Stuart Orkin is recognized for pioneering achievements in defining the molecular basis of blood disorders and fundamental regulatory mechanisms governing the development of blood stem cells and blood lineages. His research is unmatched for its combined impact on our understanding of the genetic basis of blood diseases, the control of hematopoiesis, and the basis of the human fetal hemoglobin to adult hemoglobin switch. He provided the first comprehensive molecular dissection of an inherited disorder, the thalassemia syndromes, and isolated the first regulator of blood cell development. He identified the first disease gene through positional cloning. In the past decade, he defined how fetal hemoglobin is silenced in adult red cells, starting with genome-wide association studies through to gene editing, work that forms the basis for therapeutic trials to reactivate fetal hemoglobin in thalassemia and sickle cell disease patients. His research is a paradigm for the application of molecular genetics to medicine.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Will Mr. Mark Thompson please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Mark Thompson, President and Chief Executive Officer of the New York Times Company. In his long career with the British Broadcasting Corporation, one of the most highly regarded, contentious, and contended media organizations in the world, Mark Thompson had shown himself both an adept and creative editor and also a master at negotiating minefields. The BBC in mid-century was a landmark of sobriety known affectionately as Auntie. In time, however, it came under pressure from newly created rival commercial entities, and its public funding and content became a matter of political controversy. During Mark Thompson's tenure from trainee to director general, he helped reestablish the reputation of the BBC. He introduced new guidelines for honesty and accuracy in reporting and put out fires on subjects as diverse as broadcasting Jerry Springer the Opera and Formula One racing. As the relatively new CEO of a newspaper that has an equally iconic position to maintain and defend, he has already shown the range of his talents and an ability to manage controversy and the challenges of the digital age.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Will Dr. Kip Thorne please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Kip Thorne, Fineman Professor of Theoretical Physics at California Institute of Technology. Kip Thorne's research has focused on Einstein's general theory of relativity and on astrophysics, with emphasis on relativistic stars, black holes, and especially gravitational waves. He was co-founder of the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory project known as LIGO, with which he is it LIGO? LIGO, thank you. Not Lego, it's LIGO, okay. With which he is still associated. Last month it was announced that he has won the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physics, along with Rainer Weiss and Barry Barish, for decisive contributions to the LIGO detector and the observation of gravitational waves. He was also a science consultant to the screenwriter and director of the 2014 film Interstellar and wrote the book, The Science of Interstellar, to explain the very deep physics that underlies some of the amazing sights from the movie. Black holes, higher dimensions, and 4,000-foot tall waves. We are very pleased that Kip Thorne will be a speaker in this afternoon's session with the topic of gravitational waves, 4 new windows into the universe, from Einstein to LIGO and onward.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Will Dr. Jan Zielkowski please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Jan Zielkowski, Arthur Kingsley Porter Professor of Medieval Latin at Harvard University and Director of Dumbarton Oaks Research Library and Collection. Jan Zielkowski is among the world's outstanding scholars of medieval Latin. Zielkowski's intellectual sympathies range across the tradition of the classics, most notably Virgil, medieval poetry, both philosophical and satirical, versification, rhetoric and punctuation, memory and mnemonic techniques and traditions. He's also worked extensively on vernacular literature and in particular on bestiary and animal fables and other forms of folkloric narrative. Zielkowski has also distinguished himself by his deep commitment to pedagogy and to the traditions of humanistic study. Of the many anthologies he has edited, most have come out of seminars he has taught. Among his signal accomplishments is the creation and supervision of the Dumbarton Oaks Medieval Library, which now forms a pendant to the Loeb Classical Library.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Will Billy Chen and Todd Williams please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and receive a formal welcome from the President? Madam President, I have the honor to present Billy Chen and Todd Williams, principals and partners at Todd Williams Billy Chen Architects. Chen and Williams formed their New York-based collaborative practice in 1986. Their studio of about 35 people is known for successfully combining theory and practice, architecture, and the fine arts. Their work emphasizes the importance of place and materials. They have been the architects for many notable projects, including the Barnes Foundation campus here in Philadelphia, the Neurosciences Institute in La Jolla, the David Rubenstein Atrium in New York City, and the Center for Advancement of Public Action at Bennington College in Vermont. Their magnificent Barnes Foundation buildings and grounds honor the legacy of Dr. and Mrs. Barnes and the core educational mission of the foundation through a series of spaces that maintain the intimate character of the gallery while allowing for greater access to the collections and programs. The Obama Foundation selected Chen and Williams as the architects for the Obama Presidential Center, a combination library and museum to be built in Chicago. The foundation said that the two architects, and I quote, stood out in their commitment to explore the best ways of creating an innovative center for action that inspires communities and individuals to take on our biggest challenges.
Billy. By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you, a member thereof. By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held in Philadelphia for still producing useful knowledge, I also admit you, a member thereof. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations.
So we're going to begin the program this afternoon with a few awards. So, and we're going to start with the John Frederick Lewis Award. In 1935, the APS established the John Frederick Lewis Award to recognize the best book or monograph published by the Society in a given year. And Glenn Bowersock, chair of the Lewis Award Selection Committee, will present this year's award.
Anyone who knows and loves Athens will probably remember an enigmatic monument north of the Acropolis at the eastern end of the Roman Agora. It is an octagonal marble tower that is universally known as the Tower of the Winds, and it has stood there from antiquity to the present day. The tower was designed to be simultaneously a sundial, a water clock, and a weather vane. Each face of the octagonal building displayed a relief of the appropriate wind with the sundial below. A turret, which was attached to the south face, served as a reservoir for working the water clock. The otherworldly appearance of this tower has long set it apart from those monuments that normally attract notice from tourists and classicists. It is particularly appropriate today to recall the mechanisms in the Tower of the Winds at these APS meetings, because only yesterday, Alexander Jones presented his brilliant account of the ancient Antikythera mechanism recovered from a shipwreck. Pamela Webb was right to recognize that the tower, with its long history, deserved a thorough analysis such as it had never received before. It was designed by a famous Macedonian astronomer as a horologion, or clock, but in the Byzantine Empire, it appears to have been revered as the shrine of a Christian martyr. In the Ottoman period, it was taken over by the whirling dervishes of Islam. Although Lord Elgin had wanted to remove the monument to Britain along with the Parthenon frieze, fortunately, this never happened. Only last year, the completion of a conservation project by the Athenian Ephorate of Antiquities allowed the tower to be open to the public for the first time in more than 200 years. Now, at last, to learn about it, we can turn to Pamela Webb's authoritative and fascinating study, which includes photographs of the interior taken after the reopening. The publications department of this society has produced the book in an appropriately magnificent format. The committee of the John Frederick Lewis Award, consisting of Julia Haig-Gaser, Noel Swerdlow, and myself, takes great pleasure in presenting the 2016 prize to Pamela Webb for her book, The Tower of the Winds in Athens, Greeks, Romans, Christians, and Muslims, 2 millennia of continual use.
Well, I'm deeply honored and overwhelmed by your beautiful introduction. It's a very strange conclusion to this research because it was originally supposed to be a 5-page entry in a catalog in another book I'm writing, which I owe the APS because I got a grant for that research a number of years ago. Also, there are two German monographs on the building and numerous articles, all by classical scholars, however, who rightfully want to write for their own period and so ignored 1800 years, the history of the book. I could not let that go. We don't have many opportunities to look at buildings with this kind of history and learn from them, especially with 2 millennia, 3 religions, polytheism, Christianity, and Islam, and 4 cultures, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman. So the 5 pages went away. It became a 40-page article, then a 70-page article, then a 100-page article, and a reviewer said to me, "What's wrong with you? It's a book." And so it became a book. And here we are today. I have to say that I am very grateful to Mary MacDonald. It was wonderful working with her. It's a physically gorgeous book, and it's totally due to Mary and her production staff. So thank you to her, thank you, Professor Bowersock, and thank you to the APS. I'm most grateful.
The Henry Allen Moe Prize is awarded annually for the best paper in the humanities or jurisprudence read at a meeting of the APS. Elizabeth Cropper, chair of the Henry Allen Moe Prize Selection Committee, will present this year's award.
Thank you, Linda. Before I read the citation, I'd just like to say that it's a delight to know that our president was a former winner of this award, I understand, in humanities or jurisprudence. The American Philosophical Society is pleased to award the 2017 Henry Allen Moe Prize in the Humanities to Douglas S. Massey in recognition of his paper, The Mexican-U.S. Border in the American Imagination, presented to the Society at its April 2015 meeting and published in the Proceedings of the American Philosophical Society in June 2016. Douglas S. Massey is a sociologist who's made the study of segregation and immigration his life's work. In this essay, he rehearses in part his well-established arguments about the counterintuitive relationship between undocumented immigration and border enforcement along the United States-Mexico border since the late 1970s. Despite the fact that the flow of undocumented migrants had stabilized, the presumed threat from Latino immigration was given new force through media exaggeration, political exploitation, and even academic pronouncement. The militarization of the border and the concomitant multiplication of the federal budget for Border Patrol by a factor of 13 between 1986 and 2010 paradoxically led to an increase in the net rate of unauthorized migration and subsequent acceleration of undocumented population growth north of the border. Whereas earlier migration had been concentrated on border states, the new growth was spread throughout the United States. What had been a circular flow of male workers was transformed into a rapidly growing resident population of undocumented families. Massey's focus is on the political, social, and emotional force of the idea of the southern border itself. He provides a succinct history of its emergence as a symbolic demarcation in the American mind, tracing its early construction after Mexico's independence from Spain in 1821, followed by the subsequent abolition of slavery there in 1830. The Mexican-American War, fought over both territory and slavery, led to the final establishment of the border in 1853. Both racial and economic concerns were at stake in the following century, when moments of border enforcement alternated with periods of relative lack of attention in the United States. More recently, the symbolic power of the Mexican border has enabled fear-mongering that goes beyond immigration to include claims that radical Islamists are being disguised as Mexican immigrants, and that the Ebola virus is being imported through the southern border. Massie calls attention to ways in which the historical obsession with the Mexican border, now reinforced by such spurious claims, has meant that the defense of this border, above all, has come to stand for national security. The enormous resources devoted to enforcement have produced a border economy that thrives on the unproven theory of the value of border enforcement as a means of deterring undocumented immigration. Massey's essay does not propose political or social solutions to the question of immigration across the southern border, but provides an illuminating examination of how a border can come to be endowed with such symbolic force in the absence of factual evidence. His deft presentation of this powerful argument renders his essay accessible to readers from fields in the humanities outside his own specialization. Doug Massie is the Henry G. Bryant Professor of Sociology and Public Affairs at the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University. On behalf of the Moe Prize Committee, it's my great pleasure to present the Henry Allen Moe Prize to Doug Massie. Please come to the stage.
Well, I want to express my great gratitude to the Prize Committee for expanding the definition of jurisprudence in humanities to include a quantitative social scientist and demographer. This society, this award means something to me because this society is founded to promote useful knowledge. And it seems to me the minimum requirement of useful knowledge is that it be true. And when I presented this paper back in April of 2015, it was before the presidential campaign. And I had no idea it was going to be so prophetic, for we now have a president of the United States who is insisting that we need to build a $24 billion wall along the Mexico-U.S. border, when in fact, undocumented migration from Mexico has been negative for 9 years. Total migration from Mexico to the United States is about zero, a little bit up, a little bit down, but basically zero. Mexican migration to the United States is basically over because of the demographic transition in Mexico, which has turned Mexico from a rapidly growing young society into an aging society where the average age is 28. And if you don't migrate between the ages of 16 and 30, you don't start migrating after that. So basically, Mexican migration is over. The number of apprehensions along the Mexico-US border in the most recent year for which data are available are at the lowest level since 1972. And for the first time in American history, less than half the apprehensions at the border are to non-Mexicans. So naturally, since it's been zero or negative for 9 years, and since apprehensions are at record lows, it's a perfect time to spend $24 billion on a border wall. So I think what I've been trying to communicate publicly is the folly and the waste that results when you don't pay attention to true facts and rely instead on alternative facts, and what a waste of lives and a waste of money and a waste of national energy and the waste of our national reputation as an open and receiving society has come about as a result. So thank you very much for this recognition.
Thank you, Doug. The Patrick Sufis Prize was established and funded in 2006 by Patrick Sufis, a member of the Society for 22 years until his death in 2014. The Patrick Sufis Prize honors accomplishments in 3 very different and deeply significant scholarly fields that reflect the spectacular scope of his own interests. The prize rotates each year between philosophy, psychology, and the history of science. Rich Schifrin, chair of the selection committee, will present this year's award.
I'm pleased to present the Sufis Prize because he was one of my teachers in graduate school and a longtime colleague. The recipient of the 2017 Patrick Sufis Prize for a body of outstanding work in mathematical or experimental psychology or cognitive neuroscience is Olaf Sporns, a distinguished professor at Indiana University. It's given in recognition of his transformation of the understanding of the relation of brain to behavior. Olaf Sporns has pioneered a new and revolutionary way of thinking about brain function based on mapping and modeling the brain as a complex network. Now let me give a bit of history. Neuroscience has gone through a remarkable transformation as we've been able to measure brain behavior in intact behaving humans. An example is found in the use of magnetic resonance imaging. However, for many years, the use of this technology was aimed at identifying the single brain site most responsible for some behavior. This could be described uncharitably as a modern version of phrenology, with bumps on the head replaced by bumps in the brain. It's uncharitable because bumps in the brain are actually correlated with and have some causal influence on behavior, which is not true of bumps on the head. Nonetheless, as the founder of brain connectomics, Olaf Sporns has led the neuroscience community to see that the neural basis of behavior lies in dynamic networks distributed across the brain. His research has been formal, mathematical, and computational. His work pioneered the application of graph theory to the analysis of brain connectivity, resulting in the first large-scale connectivity maps of the human brain. These maps revealed a set of highly central network hubs that link distinct functional communities that carry out behavioral tasks and processes. He's shown how the structural connections shape the ever-changing patterns of the brain's spontaneous and evoked activity. The NIH-funded Human Connectome Project carries forward a research agenda that was strongly influenced by the ideas Sporns formulated in several books years earlier. He and others are now contributing to Connectome projects aimed at animal models, development across the lifespan, and implications for mental disorders. And perhaps most important, it's not enough to identify associations between networks and behavior. Sporns has shown how the networks produce behavior by identifying the causal structure and the processes by which the networks operate. For these reasons, on behalf of the Sufis Prize Committee, which includes John Hildebrand and Jeroen Rijemakers, it is my great pleasure to present the Patrick Sufis Prize for pioneering work in cognitive neuroscience to Olaf Sporns.
Thank you very much to the APS for this extraordinary honor. I will try to sum up my work in 60 seconds or less. Every one of you has a brain. Every one of you is capable of cognition and behavior. How does this work? If you want an answer from me, I can't tell you because we don't know. One thing we do know is the most important part of your brain, we think, for cognition and behavior are nerve cells. You have a lot of them, many, 80 billion of them, roughly speaking. But each nerve cell is actually pretty dumb. It does not speak French, it doesn't ride bicycles, it doesn't write poetry. It's actually pretty limited in what it can do. Where brains become capable is when 80 billion nerve cells connect to each other. The connectivity of the brain is key, I think, to understanding its capability and its function. There's so much connectivity that if we were to unwind all the wiring in your brain and make one big thin wire out of it, it would stretch for every one of you from here half to the moon, 100,000 miles roughly. That connectivity is extraordinarily intricate. Mapping it, even just recording all the connections, let alone understanding the principles that lie behind the organization of this extraordinary network, that will occupy us neuroscientists for a very long time, I think. I've been convinced for many years that connectivity is key, and so now it's gaining momentum in my field, and we actually can't, the brain is too important, we can't leave it just to neuroscientists to figure out. We need input, we need help, we need methods, we need tools, we need approaches from computer science, from math, from statistics, from physics. That is now coming together in a new area called network neuroscience, and moving forward, I am deeply interested in continue to shape this field and hopefully make contributions in many years to come. I'm deeply honored by this award, and I thank the APS, and I thank you all. Thank you very much.
And we'll now proceed to our afternoon program with Bob Hauser, our executive officer, in the chair.
Now, will Dr. Cynthia Dwork please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Cynthia Dwork, Gordon McKay Professor of Computer Science and Radcliffe Alumni Professor at Harvard University. Cynthia Dwork, an intellectual leader in the privacy research community and computer science at Microsoft Research prior to joining Harvard in January, has made fundamental contributions that speak to the role of information technology in society. She is a leader and co-founder of work on differential privacy, which provides the first satisfactory theory for how to ensure privacy protection while enabling statistical analysis of large data sets with sensitive personal information. Her foundational work in this area has had revolutionary impact in such other disciplines as statistics and technology policy. Dwork has also made fundamental contributions to cryptography and distributed algorithms, including introducing the challenge of concurrent security in cryptographic protocols, the fundamental concept of non-malleability in cryptography, where an adversary should not be able to modify cryptographic communications, and the idea of using hash chains as proofs of work, an idea underlying cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Will Dr. Claude S. Fisher please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and receive a formal welcome from the President? Madam President, I have the honor to present Claude S. Fisher, Professor of the Graduate School in Sociology at the University of California, Berkeley. Claude Fisher's reappraisal and reformulation of the seminal work of Chicago School theorist Louis Wirth established a theoretical framework that has guided research in urban sociology for 3 decades. He offered evidence to show that urbanism did not inevitably lead to alienation and anomie, but actually created more intense ties within private social networks, even as it generated anonymity in the public sphere. He showed that urbanism transformed the composition of social networks from predominantly kinship to predominantly friendship, and argued that what earlier scholars labeled as deviance stemming from alienation and anomie in fact represented tight integration within urban subcultures. Later work showed how the telephone structured patterns of social interaction and connection in the first half of the 20th century, how inequality is socially produced and not genetically inherited in the United States, and how America's social structure and composition changed over the 20th century.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Claude. Will Dr. David Hollinger please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President? Madam President, I have the honor to present David Hollinger, Preston Hotchkiss Professor Emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley. David Hollinger's scholarship has focused on 3 overlapping areas, each represented by a half-dozen books and many articles: the history of Jews and their place in the social and natural sciences, the history of Protestantism in relation to broader political and social currents, and the history of ethnicity in American public life. His contributions have been important in each of these areas. His book, Post-Ethnic America, A History of Ethnic Identification in America, has had enormous influence here and abroad. His works on Jews and science has sensitively explored the delicate relationship between history, tradition, and belonging on the one hand, and modernity, science, and assimilation on the other. Finally, Hollinger's work on the history of American Protestantism has rescued for the use of the present generation a noble history of progressive thought and action in civil rights and struggles for toleration.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations, David. Will Mr. Edward A. Montgomery, Jr. please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President. Good morning. Madam President, I have the honor to present Edward A. Montgomery, Jr., Vice Chair of the Curtis Institute of Music, Chair of the Philadelphia Chamber Music Society, and Honorary Chair of the Endowment Campaign at the United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey. Ned Montgomery joined Mellon Bank's management training program in 1959, and over the next 3 decades served in various management positions, including Senior Vice President of Mellon Bank, President and Chief Executive Officer of Mellon National Mortgage Corporation, Vice Chairman of Mellon Bank Corporation, and Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Mellon Bank East. Following his retirement in 1989, Ned Montgomery brought his considerable experience and business acumen to the greater Philadelphia cultural community. He joined the United Way of Southeastern Pennsylvania volunteer leadership capacity in 1990. Especially interested in classical music, he has been a trustee of the renowned Curtis Institute of Music since 2003. Ned Montgomery is curious, genial, and thoughtful, and our society has long benefited from his quiet engagement and support.
By the authority and the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Will Professor Louise Richardson please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and receive a formal welcome from the President. Madam President, I have the honor to present Louise Richardson, Vice Chancellor of the University of Oxford. Louise Richardson is an incredibly accomplished scholar, teacher, and higher education administrator. She is a highly respected political scientist and now heads one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the world. Richardson has also worked hard to promote the value of multidisciplinary scholarship and the importance of interconnected communities and cultures across the globe. Her research has specialized in international security with a particular emphasis on terrorist movements. She has written widely on international terrorism, British foreign and defense policy, security institutions, and international relations. She has lectured on the subject of terrorism and counterterrorism to public, professional, media, and education groups across the world. Her publications include Democracy and Counterterrorism, Lessons from the Past, What Terrorists Want, Understanding the Enemy, Containing the Threat, The Roots of Terrorism, and When Allies Differ.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
So you think you know what's going to happen next?
No, will we have one more?
Oh,
Wait,
one
there's
more. Oh, excuse me. All right. I thought I was going to have a perfect record this meeting. But
Sorry, Dr. Turner. Anyway, will Dr. Michael S. Turner please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President?
I'm glad you didn't change your mind.
Madam President, I have the honor to present Michael S. Turner, Director of the Kavli Institute for Cosmological Physics and the Bruce V. and Diana M. Rauner Distinguished Service Professor at the University of Chicago. Michael Turner was a pioneer in creating astroparticle physics, the merger of particle physics with cosmology, showing how by testing ideas of particle physics with cosmological data, outer space becomes a window to the earliest moments of creation and to the unification of the forces and particles of nature. With well over 300 influential publications, he has been the major spokesman for astroparticle physics in the broader community. He developed and named the concept of dark energy, the forces driving the acceleration of the universe. Turner has a distinguished record of public service. He chaired the NRC Committee on Physics of the Universe, which wrote the influential 2003 report, From Quarks to the Cosmos, defining the connections between fundamental microscopic and cosmological physics.
by the authority in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do specifically admit you a member thereof. Congratulations.